and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and this is my last couple of days here in Russia. So next week the show will go back to its usual time. That's 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've been happy to be able to talk to a couple of people that normally I wouldn't be able to, such as our guest today, Kevin Goodman. He's in the UK, and we're going to be talking about the Warminster UFO. It used to be called the Warminster thing. And so that'll be exciting. I got Alejandro Rojas coming up with the UFO updates in just a couple of minutes here. I want to thank everyone that supports the show. And if you want to listen to the whole show because you can't support the show, all you have to do is tune in at either YouTube, on our YouTube channel, or podcastufo.com, and that's going to be from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesdays. You can also listen to it on the Dark Matter Digital Network, and that's on Thursdays, the full show from 10 to midnight. Now, if you want to get notifications about upcoming shows and guests, there's two ways you can do it. One, you can simply subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and you'll get notifications of our upcoming shows and shows after they've already streamed. That way, you can also I'm getting some feedback. You can also sign up on our website, podcastufo.com. In the sidebar, you'll see an email, an address you can put in to get our weekly newsletter. Every Monday, information goes out for what's coming up on our shows. Our live stream show called The Everything Else Show will begin this coming Monday evening with Nick Redfern. So we're going to start doing the Monday night shows again. And thank you for your patience. It was just too difficult to do two shows here in Russia. So I can't wait to get back home to the USA. Alejandro, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Glad to talk to you.
You survived another trip.
I know. This one was a long trip.
It was long.
Yes.
Yeah.
And hopefully
they don't keep you.
I know there's people sending me all kinds of things saying they're going to, they're contacting TSA to stop me at the airport and all that. I will tell you that Russia the Russia Ministry of Travel just came out with all these new traveling regulations. People are really upset because the airports are all clogged. They're like doing things like weighing your cell phone and your laptop and charging you extra. This all just happened two days ago. So there's pictures on the news here showing, the airport's clogged. Everybody's quite flummoxed about the whole thing. So we'll see what happens. I got a dog I got to bring through. I wonder if they're going to weigh the dog and weigh his milk bones and everything.
Well, thank goodness it's a Chihuahua.
I know. Yeah, I can't be too bad with that.
They can't charge you more than $20 for a Chihuahua, I wouldn't think.
Well, they already do charge about a couple $100, but yeah, I'm just going to see what else they're going to, like I say, they're saying they're weighing everything. Clothes, food, you name it. I mean, food that you need for like a baby or something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
A couple $100 for a Chihuahua, that's like $20 a pound.
That's right, yeah. But anyway, hopefully I'll be stateside coming this weekend and back to the listeners starting on the Monday night show and, of course, the Wednesday night shows. So, and I've been really enjoying having you on live, Alejandro. We usually have to pre-record on Wednesdays, so we'll be going back to that. So I really appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, no problem. And, we might be able to arrange it where I could do live going on forward, too. So.
Yeah, I might, I'm toying with the idea of changing the time, making a little bit earlier to accommodate you to make that happen. But we'll, I might send out or anybody can, write me an email with your thoughts on that at martin@podcastufo.com.
Yeah, and we can work something. We might be able to work something out. So let's talk.
Yeah,
see
we'll
if
chat.
we maybe
We'll
not
chat.
even have to do that.
All right. Okay. So what's happening in the UFO world?
What's happening? So I've been, ever since we talked last, actually, I've been in Vegas for the most part for the MUFON Symposium.
Right.
And people might be going, what? But I think I said this the last show that I decided to go and the main reason is that we give them a table at the UFO Congress and they give us a free table at their conference. And so I decided that, it would be kind of silly to kind of hurt our business, or at least not get out there and tell people about the Congress if I wasn't out there. And of course, my big issue was some of the topics and stuff I didn't felt met the criteria that MUFON should stick to. But I wasn't the only one that felt that way. There were certainly a lot of people that had come up and shared their feelings as well. But regardless, it was good. I mean, it's good. I've got lots of friends at MUFON. There's lots of good people there. And we were able to talk to and meet with a lot of people. So overall, I'm really glad that I went. So,
well, that's good.
We haven't had a...
Go ahead. Oh, well, I was just going to say, I know there was a little bit of controversy on the type of speakers they had there. And was it Andrew Basaggio, or however you say his name, said that he had actual proof he was going to give everyone at the show about time travel? Is it true? Is there really time travel, Alejandro? Did you hear that?
Well, there wasn't any. There were claims that there are trying time travel, but and in fact, he even said he, was part of a training corps with Barack Obama, who they trained for time travel and traveling to Mars and stuff like this, and that he and Barack were, chosen to be president, and that he's going to be president one day, and a lot of weird stuff. Essentially, that they have Loch Ness monsters on Mars, that he thinks there may be plesiosaurs up there. There was a photograph not too long ago of a rock that looks somewhat maybe similar if you really squinted your eyes, like some sort of dinosaur. And he said that could be the same thing as the Loch Ness monster. So it was some pretty wild stuff that was backed up by nothing but his own anecdotal information. We actually talked for a little while, and he is a nice guy. He's an intelligent person, and that's what's difficult, because where does he come up with this stuff is the hard part. Is he really actively seeking to fool people? But I essentially told him, let me know when you have something of substance. And he claims that he and Michael Salla have enough information to get some government documents that prove his stories. And I told him, well, I look forward to seeing that, and we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm of course skeptical he'll be able to produce anything like that. But yeah, just a lot of wild claims backed up by nothing but anecdotal information. And, I guess it makes it even especially difficult for someone like me, because I get, and you as well, I'm sure, I get emails with wild claims on a regular basis, several a week. And the claims are extraordinary. I mean, really, really wild stuff that I couldn't have ever come up with. But they're just that, they're just stories from people. So I think that, it's good to hold ourselves to a bit of a higher standard on these sort of things. So especially MUFON, which is supposed to be a scientific organization according to their mission statement. So I don't wish anybody any ill will or any or bad, but I'm glad that this is over, and hopefully going forward, we'll be able to highlight some work of like some of your guests. It sounds like you have a great guest today. That's the sort of thing that I think we should be paying more attention to.
Right. But overall, you said you had a good time, and was there
definitely?
Where were some of the were there some really good UFO related speakers at this show? I went through the guest list a long time ago, and I can't remember who was there.
Well, Richard Dolan was there. Of course, he's been talking, letting people know he's been skeptical of these other claims as well, and he did speak on that. There were a couple other people. Michael Schratt was there.
Oh, yeah.
And Michael's great, going over different cases, although he was kind of arguing, look, a lot of these cases look like they are probably, advanced military craft, and I think that kind of plays in with the theme a bit, but still, he's not saying this out of nowhere. He is a researcher, so
Yeah.
He's comparing it to different technologies, and he's made these cool models. I mean, he's got like a dozen different models of different UFO sightings that he puts at his table. And he even has these things where you can print them out, you can cut them and fold them, and make models of these sightings yourself. So it's super cool stuff. I love Michael's work. And I didn't get to see any of the talks because I was busy at our table, but I did talk with Michael quite a bit and about all of those things, and really neat stuff. And I saw him do this similar talk recently in Arizona. So that was really neat. And I know there are a couple others, but I need to go over the list and purchase some of the DVDs of some of the others and watch them. Most of the buzz, of course, was about some of the more spectacular stuff, but so all the rest kind of got washed out, so you didn't hear much about anything but that when it came to the speakers.
Sure. Now listen up. I told you just before we started here that I'm unable, I don't know, I was blocked here on your website last year, and I can't get onto your website, so I don't know what's going on in the UFO world. Is there anything been happening since last week?
Well, there are some things. Of course, we do our daily UFO headlines, and we've got quite a few up there and some interesting stuff. But we do have an interesting sighting that Roger Marsh gave us. It's pretty weird, speaking of weird. This sighting was allegedly at 11:24 a.m. on June 25th, 2017. And this was a gentleman who said he was at a fast food drive-thru in Moore Park, California, when he says he saw a cloaked aircraft that uncloaked, and it had a U.S. Air Force insignia on it. So It's kind of funny.
Wow.
He said that he saw this craft, and he was looking right at it, and his eyes hurt to look at it. He says that he thinks it was using some kind of neural confusion, which is kind of funny. But he said it paint, and on the table he could see USAF 003. It was kind of a bright object. It looked like it was round with some sort of like tail on the end of it. He called it kind of like a cookie pan with some kind of stabilizer on the back. But he said he looked at it, and it was hard to see, and it had some sort of electromagnetic like disturbance that was going on in the area, and it seemed like the cloaking device like kind of turned off, and then it turned back on, and he couldn't see it anymore, he said. So he saw this thing kind of disappear right in front of his eyes. He said it was about 450 feet above the I-18 overpass in Moore Park, California. So, and he drew some illustrations that we have on the sighting. But this is certainly I don't remember ever getting a report like this. So this is a weird one. This is something different.
Now, what about, you just talked a couple minutes ago about Michael Schratt. This sounds like a case for him to look into.
Yeah, I agree. There's not much to make of it because, I mean, you don't have much to go on except for some witness testimony and pictures. And the pictures do not look like anything that, looks like something that should be in the air. In fact, it looks kind of like a bomb, like a really old, it's circular with like this tail on one side, kind of like a first nukes or something like that. Huh. So it's kind of a weird shape. Of course, this person could just be messing with everybody, and MUFON is looking into it, so we'll see what they find out. But yeah, it's something different, that's for sure.
Wow, yeah. And so what else is happening?
What else? One other story I'd like to just kind of mention, and this is from Dr. Don Farkas, and he's wrote the book UFOs over Romania. And he wrote an article for us that I think is really interesting. Essentially, he was like, everybody's talking about ETs and all of these different explanations, kind of like that aliens are just people from another planet. And he's saying, hey, we can't forget the work of Jacques Vallée and others who feel that there could be some other answers out there. And these other ideas, hyper civilizations. So what he's kind of saying is it could be something that is beyond our comprehension, that, these things could be not material, coming from, possibly coming from other dimensions, or just other types of life that we are not familiar with. So it's a really interesting article that gets you thinking about alternatives to the extraterrestrial hypotheses. So I think people will find that interesting. So far, it looks like readers have. There's been a few comments there. So yeah, I would invite people to check that out, and I'll see that on the front page of openminds.tv.
Hey, Alejandro, have you heard about this this new campaign to launch what is being called as Laser SETI?
I mean, I've heard some. I mean, there's been talk about this laser SETI thing over the years, and for a long time. I mean, even since the beginning of SETI, practically, when they talked about different ways they might be able to communicate or find communication. So I know it's some other type of. Of course, we didn't have the technology back then to do it so much, and now. There's been a lot of talk about, hey, this could be something that they're using.
Yeah, they're trying to launch up. I'm sorry to interrupt you there. No, I just I saw on Indiegogo, I get email alerts from them, and so they're launching a campaign, a GoFundMe type of situation, and I think they're about halfway into the campaign. And these things are going to be distributed, worldwide, and looking for signals worldwide. I mean, in a scope of 360 degrees, and not just one area of the sky. So it's going to, it's really interesting. I sent a note out to Seth Shostak to see if he's up for talking about it. We'll see what happens, but I know they're starting to move forward with the ideas. What I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that the idea had been around for a long time.
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah, that sounds. Again, though, still it's using technologies that, kind of to Dr. Farkas's point, it's using technologies that we're aware of. And in this case, just a couple technologies when there's so many different possibilities out there. I mean, recently they were able to bilocate a photon. So essentially, they're talking about, a teleporter's been made, but they were able to teleport instantaneously a photon from one area to another. So, I mean, quantum communications is something that people have talked about, using that technology, because, of course, it's one photon's one small little thing. But if you could use that to do bits and bytes and stuff like, it's easier to use that sort of technology for actual communication instead of physical material. So I know, and that could be, and people have talked about this in SETI as well, it could be some sort of technology like that is still beyond our grasp, but is something we haven't developed or perhaps even haven't even conceived of yet.
I believe that. I believe you're 100% on target with that. There's so many. It's better than doing nothing, but
it is. I agree.
But
because it could be some wayward signal, that wasn't maybe even intended to necessarily be a message. Now, Seth Shostak will say it takes so much energy to blast, signals out, that if there was a signal that came to us, then it was probably intentional, but it would have taken a ton of energy. So it's likely that if we receive a signal, then it was intended for us for that reason. But who knows? It could be, something flying by that releases some sort of errant signal that we're able to detect. That's what the WOW signal could have been. Who knows?
Yeah, and we may develop a different way of detecting as far as space telescopes go. Satellite, type of technology down the road where we can possibly detect life in other ways on planets somehow as our technology gains that'll have nothing to do with anything SETI has been trying to attempt.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all things. This is all speculation, but things that could happen.
Yep. Right.
Yeah. So.
Right.
I guess. Do you have anything else you'd like to talk about real quickly before we say good night?
No, that's about it. But looking forward to having you back in the States, my friend.
Oh, so am I. And I said good night. It's night here in Russia. It's morning where you're at.
Right.
And who knows
yes,
what time it is where any of the live listeners are. So thanks so much, Alejandro.
Yep, thank you, and have a great show.
All right, I'll talk to you on Monday.
Talk to you later.
All right. So our guest coming up is Kevin Goodman. Now, Kevin was on our show, oh boy, I want to say back in 2013, I believe it was. And he actually had a sighting at Warminster, and we're going to be talking about that. I hope you have taken a little bit of time to research. This is quite an interesting flap that was going on, and we're going to be talking about a number of things. So, Kevin, how are you? Welcome to the show again.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'm fine, thank you. Caught with my underwear down because obviously, as I said to you earlier, I thought this was going out on Saturday, and of course it's now going out today.
Yes. That's no problem. I'm just glad you could do it. You didn't make any plans, and here we are. So
indeed,
your room looks a little dark. That's it, though. You can't do anything about that.
Sadly, not.
Okay, we'll just
unfortunately,
leave it.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. We'll just continue the way it is, which is fine. So Kevin, can you give your background, your basic background, so the listener who may not be familiar with you can get to know you?
Well, there are a lot of people that aren't familiar with me, to be honest. I was brought up a good little Catholic boy. I went to a Catholic junior school, and I had the religion rammed down my throat, basically until about the age of 9, when I rebelled. Not in any sort of violent way or anything like that, but I started to question the teachings of the church. And because I was a child of the space age, then obviously my eyes tended to go more heavenwards. So my interest in UFOs began then.
So how young would you say that you were interested in the topic?
I would say from about 9 or 10 years of age onwards.
Wow. Now, for any particular reason, did anyone in your family have a sighting or anything like that? Or do you remember what it was that made you fascinated in it to begin with?
Well, no, as I said, my family were quite strict Catholics, so any thoughts of God is a spaceman were sort of almost looked upon as being heresy. But my father used to get a daily paper in this country called the Daily Mirror. I think it was in the Mirror, that excerpts from Erich Von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods was serialized. And of course, immediately that struck a chord with me.
Wow. And did you start reading regular UFO books at a young age?
Not straight away. I mean, I know this sort of almost contradicts what I said about my parents, but my father actually was given a book by one of his workmates, and it was called The UFO Reader by J. David, which was a sort of anthology of various UFO cases. And I devoured it, and from that day onwards, if I could go to the local library when I was old enough, I would borrow any books on the UFO phenomena I could find.
Wow, okay. And now the Warminster UFO, you kind of took the reins on that one. Can you talk about how all that happened?
Yeah, well, as I said, I was basically borrowing books from the library. And then in the early to mid 1970s in England, a publishing company called Tandem started to reprint in paperback a lot of the old classic UFO books. People like Brad Steiger, Brinsley, the Poer Trench, Donald Keyhoe.
Whoops, we have, it looks like we have a Skype freeze here. Let me see what I can do. I might have to hang in, everybody, live. We are definitely having problems with the internet here. This is satellite internet here in Russia, and I apologize for that. But I think it's on Kevin's end. So I'm going to try to hang up and give him a call back. So hang in there, everyone, listening live. And we'll get this going again here. Okay. And I know that Kevin is on London Wi-Fi, I believe. It's public Wi-Fi that just goes out, but it's been it has been working really well for him, according to him. Now it's not working, but we'll give it another try here. And all right, so he is not picking up. So what do I do in a case like this? All right, I'm going to wait a minute. I'll try. If you're in the chat room and you'd like to give a call to the show and talk about either a UFO sighting, I see, Mike, you just posted something in the chat. If you want to give a call, dial either my Skype name, which is Marty Willis, that's MartyWillis. You can go ahead and Skype that. Or if you'd like to call, that's 603-967-4030. And if you're listening live, please do give a call. Talk about a sighting or just any topic you'd like to chat about. Go ahead, and I will try Kevin one more time here and see if I can get him back on. But please do feel free to either call or Skype in, because I really don't want to cancel this show if I don't have to. All right. So Kevin is not answering. So go ahead and if you want to call in, or even just throw something on the chat if you'd like a question to talk about. I have been here in Russia now for 44 days, I think it's been, and I've been looking for local people. It's hard to strike up a conversation about UFOs. Never mind, it's finding someone that speaks English. I've only in the 44 days that I've been here, I think that's only happened a couple of times where someone can speak good enough English to carry on a conversation. So that's not happening, but I'm very interested in different countries that have UFO sightings that not too many people talk about. And so if I just saw someone from Vienna on the Eduardo. If you hear me, Eduardo, if you'd like to give a call either at 1-603-967-4030, 1 is the country code, or you can Skype me at Marty Willis, that's MartyWillis. That's my Skype name. So if Eduardo, you want to call in, tell me what's going on in Vienna. Love to hear from you. And here's Kevin. Let's see if this works. Kevin, are you there?
I'm there. Sorry about it. I don't know what happened there.
Was that your... it's funny. I have... let me try. Someone just called. I've been begging for people to call. Let me see if I can merge this call.
That might have been me.
Oh, hello. Did you call in your... Hello, caller. You're on the line,
Martin,
caller.
This is Mike.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for calling.
Can you hear me?
Luckily, we just got our guest
problem.
back, but you know what? Kevin had some trouble with his internet, but he is back. But I do appreciate you calling, Mike. You were on the chat, obviously. Did you want to talk quickly about any sighting in particular or anything like that, or do you have a question for Kevin in England?
But I tell you a funny story about a sighting.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I was driving home from my cousin's house late one night. It was about 2 in the morning, and pulled up to the end of their street, and there's a stop sign there. Started to go around the corner, and there was 2 blocks down in between the trees, there was a triangular craft hovering between the trees about 30 feet off the ground, I would say. And it had 3 lights on it, and then it had like a red light in the center. And I started driving towards it because my brain said, well, that's a UFO, but I didn't want to believe it. So I started driving towards it. Well, I got about a block and a half, and then I stopped, and I was like, that's a UFO. And it was facing in a direction that was away from me, and it was moving slowly away. But then it started backing up. Well, actually, what happened is I stopped, and then I put my car in reverse, and I floored it, and the craft came backwards, and it came over my car, and my car engine died. And I was sitting right back at the stop sign where I had turned at, and I looked up and down the street, and there was nobody around. So, you know me, I'm very knowledgeable about UFOs and aliens. So, my first thought was, how do I get out of this situation? Because I'm about to be abducted. And I thought, well, they hate witnesses. So I started slamming on my horn, and I jumped out of the car, and I started running down the street and back towards my cousin's house. And it just so happens that I was lucky because there was a party going on at one of the houses on the corner. And about 50 people came running out, and they all saw this craft hovering over my car. And then the craft just shot straight up. But the 2 funny things to the story is they said that I screamed like a little girl. And the event happened on April 1st.
Oh, no. Yeah, and
yeah,
try to get everyone to believe you on that one. Wow, that's interesting. You know, so many of the triangular UFOs that people describe have that red light in the center. And also, it's funny, I actually spoke with someone at an auction gallery, someone that I've known a long time, that kind of said the same thing. It was a triangle, and they got out of the car, and the thing moved back. Of course, they didn't. They were panicking, you know, also, but the thing just stopped right over them, I guess, basically. So you had about 50 witnesses. Did you ever report this?
Yeah, it's actually on the National UFO Reporting Center. If you go out and you look for, it's either 1999, 2000, or 2001, go out to April 1st, and it's called UFO Chase Me, and I actually reported it.
Great. Well, that's awesome. Well, Mike, thanks so much. Our guest is back. I really appreciate you going to bat and filling in while Kevin was missing. So I appreciate that a lot.
No problem. You're welcome, Martin.
All right. You take care.
You're welcome.
All right.
Bye. You too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, Kevin, so let me see if I... Oh, he's gone. Very good. So that was an interesting sighting, huh?
It was. I mean, it sort of got shades of the X-Files almost, hasn't it?
That's right. Bizarre, but that was good thinking to, you know, beep on the horn and all that. I don't know if I'd dare to. You know, I think if something like that was right over my car, I'd be afraid to do about anything. But
I think the important thing is to get as many independent witnesses as possible.
Yeah, that's
for something like that, because you've got a hell of a more chance of being believed if there are more witnesses.
Yeah, that's right. If he was all alone, no one saw it, or anything like that, that's almost a story that someone would say, yeah, right, you know. But when you get that many witnesses, it's that is exciting, and that was really good thinking on his feet to actually make the racket.
Absolutely, and I mean, you know, it's a pity that by the sounds of it, this wasn't followed up by someone or somebody of a description.
Right. So let's talk about your situation and the Warminster. Now, where are you located right now? Are you right in London?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right. I know you said you're someplace that has free Wi-Fi, and I know London does. Where are you in reference?
I'm actually back in the area in which I was born, which is 12 miles west of Birmingham. It's a town called Stourbridge.
Yep. And So the Warminster area, how far is that in reference to that?
We have clocked it going down by car. It's 120 miles away.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And for the person that has absolutely no idea what we're talking about, can you go over and then how it got the term, the thing, and all that? And I know there were some birds that died with some type of vibration noises that were happening, and it was kind of very unusual. So can you describe in detail what was going on?
Right. Well, the reason why it was initially known as the Warminster thing was because in those days, which was 1964, 1965, Warminster was a small country town in Wiltshire. And very few people in those days had heard of the term UFO. Flying saucer was probably one of the more popular sort of descriptions going around. So it was named the Thing because they couldn't find anything else better to describe what was happening around the town.
And so I heard there was a debunking tour, people trying to debunk it, simply by saying, it's ridiculous and all that, which you do hear a lot when anything like this happens. Was that ever overcome, or do people still try to debunk the whole situation?
People do try to debunk it. The problem with Warminster, as I said earlier, was that it was in the 1960s. Now, there was no great communications network in those days as we have now. So everything that was coming out of the town was either second-hand or written down and then possibly misinterpreted. But going back to what I've always said is that I have experienced the phenomenon, and believe you me, something strange did happen in that town. There is no two ways about it.
And can you describe what people were seeing?
Yes, I mean, initially the whole thing started out with noises, basically. For example, I mean, in Shuttlewood's first book, The Warminster Mystery, he tells a story of a Warminster woman who was on her way to midnight mass in 1964, and she was apparently assailed by sonic sounds and pressure as she walked towards the church, and it made her sort of collapse to her knees and left her frightened. Later on, there were things like noises other people said sounded like branches being brushed across the roofs of their houses, pebbles being dropped onto the roofs of houses. So all this sort of initial, almost introductory phenomenon started in late 1964, carried on through till 1965 until the first visual sighting was made, which was made by a council worker in the Warminster Central car park, where he was looking over towards the direction of Cradle Hill and Cobb Heap, where he actually then saw what he described as two red-hot pokers hanging in the sky, which then burst asunder and disappeared without any sound.
Wow. That's a very unusual description. Red-hot pokers. So I'm guessing that it's kind of like a sort of like a bright orangish color, or red, reddish orange.
Yeah,
bright.
I would say probably similar to the sort of colors you'd see, sort of on a good sunset.
I see. So, hey, Dave Matherly on the chat. You can go ahead and get lost if you'd like, okay? I'm sorry, I just had to say that. Anyway, and Monica, you can take them out. Go ahead. Anyway, so I want to know this first visual sighting. You actually saw this thing going on. So can you talk about that?
Yeah.
What how many years after the fact was that?
Well, the first visual sighting. I would say about 6 months, approximately.
No, I mean,
possibly other things had been seen in the town previously to that, but whether they were recorded or reported to someone, we don't know.
Yeah. So, what about yourself, though? What did you see when you were there?
Oh Lord, what didn't I see or experience? That's, I suppose, the question. Well, I started to go down as a student in 1976, and that year in this country, it was one of the hottest summers on record. And on the Saturday night, we were taken up to Cradle Hill, and it was so hot, still. I mean, I swear blind you could have boiled eggs off the tarmac on the road there. The sun had set, and in those days, people were using what we now call UFO detectors, which work on the theory that magnetic pulses from the UFOs would disturb the Earth's natural magnetic field, and it was battery powered, and there were two contact points with a compass needle. If the magnetic field fluctuated, the pointer would move, touch one of the electrodes to the side of it, and then a buzzer would go off. So we were scanning the skies, and then these two bright starlight objects were seen to go across. They turned immediately sort of right. They were very high up, and then disappeared. And then immediately they disappeared, the two detectors went off simultaneously. They were sheltered away from any wind, anything. They were completely protected. So that was the very first sighting I had, and from that day onwards, I vowed to keep going back.
Wow. And how many times would you say that you went back, and did you see something most of the time?
I've lost count of the number of times I've been back now, to be honest with you. I mean, it was in 1977. It was Easter. And my friend and I, Colin Rees, were walking down from the copse at the top of Cradle Hill being the main sky watching location. And there was nobody else about. And we just stopped and looked over to our right, and there were these four red lights coming towards us over the downs, equally spaced apart, just pulsing. They carried on coming across until they stayed stationary over Battlesbury Hill, which is an old Iron Age fort, which is directly in front of the Cradle Hill Skywatch point. They were completely equidistantly spaced apart, as I said, in a line, flashing, and they must have hung there in silence for getting on towards a minute. And then immediately, the left-hand object shot off at high speed from a standing start, performed a flawless 90-degree turn without stopping upwards, and shot into the sky. The other three objects then stayed there flashing for about another 30 seconds and then just shot straight up again. Now, it was a moonless night. It was past dusk. There was no wind, and it was that still you could hear the trains going through the railway station in Warminster, which was about half, three-quarters of a mile away. But these babies did not make a sound.
Wow. You know, I got to tell you, when I had my one really good sighting, the one that I could not explain in any type of way, and I wasn't into the UFO subject at all, but that was the most baffling thing of all, was the fact that it made no sound, because that just, it didn't register in my brain, like, how can this thing be moving and doing what it's doing and there be no sound? I couldn't get that.
We just stood there slack-jawed. You know, I mean, I'd been coming to Warminster on and off for 18 months or so, something like that. And that, you know, it might sound trite, but it was almost like a religious experience. It was, for me at least, a life-changing moment. Suddenly I realized, you know, there is something in this. You know, it can't be explained away by high-flying satellites, natural phenomenon, or even secret military testing. Because although the place where we saw the sighting, it was on the cusp of Army land, which is the Salisbury Plain training area, even today, we haven't got anything that can perform that kind of maneuver at all. We are talking of the time when the Phantom jet was probably the highlight of military technology.
Now, when I mentioned earlier, I know there was some people debunking, trying to debunk this. What were they actually attributing what was happening? What were they attributing it to?
They were attributing it to again, secret military testing, mass hysteria, and basically media hype. I mean, Arthur Shuttlewood, who really put Warminster on the map, was a reporter for the local journal, the Warminster Journal, and he really became a sort of guru for people who were visiting the town to look for the UFOs, for the phenomenon, the enigma, the thing, call it what you want. And he would spend night after night after night up on Cradle Hill looking and reporting any sightings that he saw.
Wow. And when would you say the last known sighting there was?
Well, I think, to be honest, you've got more chance of seeing a UFO in any other part of the country, or in the world even these days. But it must have been about 6-7 years ago that I was last contacted by someone via the website to explain something similar to what I'd seen that Easter night that had happened over the Longleat estate. So, yeah, UFOs are still seen in the Warminster area, but definitely not in the frequency that they used to be.
Yeah, I've always wondered what the mystery of UFO flaps could possibly be. On some cases, it may be related to something natural, a natural phenomenon that occurs somehow. But you try to, of course, any logic that we can use as human is probably not going to work on whatever it is showing up. But my logic says, why would they show up at the same place if they can get from, say, Birmingham, from another solar system or another galaxy or whatever? Why would they stay in the area, and why would they show up in that area over and over again? That's always baffled me. Have you ever given that some thought?
Yeah, you have to remember that the Warminster area in Wiltshire, it's otherwise known as the Warminster Triangle. Within spitting distance, you have Stonehenge, Avebury, Silbury Hill, Glastonbury. You've got a lot of prehistoric sites that are, shall we say, for want of a better word, mystical. Now, whether that has something to do with it, I don't know. But people would come to Warminster, they would see something, they would go back and tell their friends would say, oh, that's interesting, maybe we'll go down. They go down, the same thing happens again. So the whole thing was basically self-perpetuating for getting on towards 15 years.
That interesting. We have some questions that came in on the forum, and I'm going to read you. It's kind of a lengthy one here. Jeremy Corbell, who has been on this show before, he's a filmmaker. He has some old footage on his website from the 1965 Warminster town. It's a hall meeting where witnesses speak of what they saw, and also footage of a report by 2 British policemen filed in 1967. The policemen were later silenced under the Official Secrets Act. In the clip, the policemen draw the craft they claim followed their police car. There's also a 1990 documentary, I remember watching that, on YouTube with some witness testimony. Are you aware of any other video of witness testimony that you could direct the listeners to?
Not as such. YouTube is a very useful tool, and it's quite amazing what does pop up there. There were 1 or 2 media programs made in the 60s and the early 70s by the BBC. The first was one called Pie in the Sky, which was broadcast, again, believe it or not, around April time in 1966 or 67. And that was a half-hour program which looked into the Warminster mystery itself. So, as I say, there are snippets that you can find on YouTube. Going back to the question you just read out, the town hall meeting itself was called by the council to allay fears that they were about to be invaded. I believe John Cleary Baker, who was then the chairman of UFORA, and the editor of Flying Saucer Review. He was there. People were locked outside the town hall. It was reported by most of the television crews of the time. So there was a certain amount of media frenzy involved. Now, going back to the policeman sighting, that actually, I think, was in 1967, which I remember it well, believe it or not, even though I was only less than 10, in that there was a spate in this country of UFO sightings, and it was around Guy Fawkes night, because I remember hearing the rockets and the fireworks going up in the sky around my home, and I was thinking, well, that'll scare the buggers off for starters. That particular footage was actually, I believe, taken in Devon, and it was what's known as the famous Flying Cross incident, which debunkers and skeptics, if you want to, if it's up to what people want to believe, they say all they were doing was chasing Venus.
I love that. You hear that quite often. And the cross thing, we had a guest, Klaas Swan, that was on a couple of weeks ago, and he had a sighting with his wife, and there was crosses. You don't hear of that too often.
No, you don't. And I mean, I always find it very sad that those that are prepared for sightings and that believe in UFOs are always the ones that never get to see them. Right.
Now, you were prepared when you were in Warminster and had there many sightings. What about filming or photography? Were you able to get anything that came out and looked like something?
Now, there's a story. I mean, don't forget, we are talking, first of all, the pre-digital age. I had just passed, because I just left college, I had passed my photography course, and I'd taken down my camera, which was a 35mm single reflex Praktica with a screw-on telephoto lens. Now, one afternoon, we were recovering from getting into the house from the hill in the early hours, and my friend who had nicked, for want of a better word, the double bed that was facing the window, I assumed he was asleep. He jumped off and he said, "What the hell's that?" And I joined him at the window, and there was a cigar-shaped object going from right to left from Cop Heap over towards Elm Hill, and I thought, this is too good a chance to miss. So don't ask me why I did it, because I don't know. I ran down the stairs, screwing on the telephoto lens, went outside into the garden, braced myself against the clothesline pole that was there, and focused, exposed correctly, shot off 4 shots. The fourth and final one actually shows it approaching the trees on Elm Hill. And my friend, while I was doing this, yelled down to me, said, "It's got to be real because there are people on the hill and they're pointing at it." Well, of course, immediately I think to myself, I've got proof. This is not a fake. So when I got home, I got the film developed, and in those days it took a week. And when I got the photographs back, there was blue sky, grey clouds, and on the 4th photograph, the tips of the trees on Elm Hill, but there was no bloody object. Now, I had that thing dead centre in the viewfinder. So what was it?
Jeez.
It was a physical object to us, but it did not register on the film.
Wow, you're not the first one to say that. You realize that?
No, I don't, actually, to be honest.
No, I've heard other people say that they've taken shots of UFOs and nothing showed up on their film just didn't, was no good.
Well, I've heard reports of the film being fogged.
Yes.
But I don't think I've ever come across a case where whatever you were photographing was not on the film, but everything else was.
Yes. I had Chase Klitsky on my show, about the last time that you were on my show, a long time ago.
A long time ago.
Yeah, and she said that they were all set to film what was showing up in this field, and I think in Tennessee it was. And so this big triangle came over, and all their camera equipment, all the batteries were dead on everything.
That sounds like some form of electromagnetic interference to me, personally, similar to the gentleman you were speaking to earlier on.
Right, right. All interesting. Makes you really wonder, doesn't it? It's
really it something. Does, but of course the thing is, now we live in an age where, and I will use the dirty word, where films and photographs can be so easily faked.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know, and I mean, I would give my right arm for some of the technology we've got now that I could have used in the 1970s, because then at least I would have the proof.
Right, right. Now, when I before this show, I've been out all day and fortunately didn't have a long time to do some research. But when I first looked online for Warminster UFOs, I noticed there's some that are fairly recent on YouTube. Have you been keeping an eye on YouTube for any sightings that show up there? Because I know a lot of people will just plain post a video right from their phone or whatever without doing any research. Have you looked through that recently?
No, I don't do it religiously. I sort of check that sort of thing about once a week. I mean, there was a case maybe a month, 6 weeks ago now, of something being seen over the Clay Hill area, which has now been attributed to a drone.
Ah, yeah. We do have we have a lot of challenges, don't we? We have Chinese lanterns, drones, and then CGI. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I live now in a built-up area, and New Year's Eve, you know, I always go to bed early because I'm not a New Year's person per se, and you know, I just look out the curtains just before I went to bed, and you'd see this sort of 6 or 7 moving lights going across the sky, and for a moment, even though as a seasoned sky watcher, you know, you get excited and you start thinking about, is it a UFO? And you think, then don't be so bloody stupid, they're Chinese lanterns.
Yes. You know, I was 4th of July a couple years ago, I saw my first bunch of Chinese lanterns, and I'm telling you, I understand why people call them in for UFOs. It looked pretty spectacular.
Well, I mean, not only are they the bane of our lives, but they're also blooming dangerous as well, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, yeah. I know a number of, they're banned in a lot of places because of that. Fire start.
I wish,
you know,
I wish they were over here.
Yeah, the rule of thumb is the candle's supposed to go out, and then, you know, it cools down, and then, you know, goes down to the ground with the candle out. That's what it's supposed to happen, but it doesn't always happen. They can actually catch on fire and go to the ground in a burning mess. So
exactly, and I mean, there's been at least one case of an entire wheat field being burnt due to a Chinese lantern.
Yeah. Well, speaking of wheat fields, have you ever, I know this is way off topic, but you're in the country where there's a lot of crop circles. Does any
yes.
Does any of that happen in the area of Warminster?
I believe, and it's a long time ago, it's probably the early 1980s, I believe the modern era of the crop circle actually started around that area, yes.
And has anyone ever tried to tie the two of them in together?
I think a lot of people who believe in UFOs do. Oh Lord, how long ago had it been? Been about 5-6 years ago now. I actually went down to Warminster because we were in the process of organising a convention/conference down there, and there had been a crop circle on the slopes, on the fields below the slopes of Clay Hill, which is a very imposing landmark just outside Warminster. And I went to see it. I mean, obviously from the hill, not actually in the field, because believe you me, looking at it from on the slopes of the hill was darn sight better. It was a beautiful, almost 3-dimensional Rubik Cube design. And whoever did it, be they ETs or young farmers, they need to be congratulated because it was a beautiful piece of work.
I know. I've watched a couple of videos and seen images of some amazing works, and if it's actually done in the middle of the night with strings and what is it, strings and poles, and then
And
boards on their feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to measure them so accurately. There are people that claiming that they're doing these things, and maybe it's another mystery. There's a lot of research where people are claiming that there's something going on in some of these crop circles, not all of them, but where the soil changes, the structure of the plant changes, all that. I don't know. I'm on the fence about crop circles. I really don't know what to think about
to be
it.
honest with you.
Yeah, and you're in the country where it all began, and it kind of leaves you to wonder, if it's happening there, why isn't it happening everywhere? It happens once in a while in the United States and Canada and maybe a few other countries, but you don't hear of it widespread worldwide. It's another.
Well, if they're hoaxes, then they're obviously imitators, for want of a better word. But in the Shuttlewood's second book, which was called Warnings from Flying Friends, he has a picture of the wheat field next to Cradle Hill, in which he shows a photograph of what he calls 2 UFO landing nests. Now, that was in 1967.
Oh, because you didn't really hear about, crop circles until when? We're talking the 70s or 80s?
Onwards.
Oh, 1990s. Is it that late?
80s.
Oh, 80s. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but then again, I mean, they have been around for hundreds of years. I mean, there's a woodcut, which people can hopefully look up on Google, of a mowing devil. And it's a stylized description of the devil actually cutting a crop circle in something like the 17th century.
Isn't that something? Wow. So what other, you mentioned where the location of this is, and the other things that are going on in the area. Are there other, besides the UFOs and the crop circles? A lot of times you hear about other events sort of in the paranormal area.
Yeah.
Is that happening in that area too?
It is. Again, I experienced something myself, in so much that on the second visit there, we took with us the highlight of modern technology in those days, a cassette recorder. And we decided to make like an audio diary of our visit to the hill one night. And we got what was not actually audible at the time, a set of clicks on the tape. And to me, it sounded like the sort of clicks you get from a Geiger counter. Now, like I say, we did it again the following night with a different recorder, new batteries, different cassette. Same thing happened again. So what the cause of that was, I don't know, because there wasn't any power anywhere near us. There were no power lines. The nearest house was about half a mile away. The army camp itself was about half a mile away. We were right out in the middle of nowhere, and we got these strange sounds.
Wow. So going back to sound, since we're on that topic right now, did they or do they continue in the Warminster area? First of all, can you describe this thing about the birds falling out of the sky and stuff like that? What was happening?
Yes, that was down to David Hooton, I think. Yeah, that was actually reported to Arthur Shuttlewood by Hooton. Shuttlewood never actually, I don't think, experienced or saw that for himself. Hooton was a very character, in so much that later on he announced that it should not be known as the Warminster Mystery, it should be known as the Crockerton Mystery, which is a small village near the town. He was a colourful character, shall we say. So whether or not anything actually it can be actually put down to him, I don't know. I mean, he died about 10 years ago now, so again, sadly, he's another one from the genesis of the phenomenon who's no longer around to be questioned or interviewed.
Right. And what other types of things were affected? You say people felt like there were pebbles falling on the roof and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
What about vibrations? I've heard people talk about that before. Did anyone...
Yeah, there were sort of sonic vibrations as well. I mean, the first one, the Marjorie Bay incident, is the one that immediately springs to mind. But Warminster was a very unique UFO case, and there were no abductions as far as I know. I mean, there was a report of some cattle being mysteriously teleported from one field to another. But it was mainly the lights in the sky for the majority of the phenomenon that seems to be more famous for.
Now, you just mentioned cattle, so I have to ask you, when I was asking you about other things happening, has anyone ever reported cattle mutilations?
Not as far as I'm aware.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are other people that research the Warminster phenomenon. Whether or not they've got any information on that, I can't say.
Yeah. Now, have you ever outside of this, the Warminster area, or is that kind of your bailiwick on what you're interested in?
It's my primary focus, but then again, I do have an interest in the UFO phenomenon, full stop.
Right.
So, I don't, in this country, I think the only sort of famous cases, if you can call Warminster famous, that are like that will be obviously Bonnybridge up in Scotland, which is a mirror to Warminster apparently, and the Rendlesham Forest incident.
Yes, that always seems to come up when I speak to someone from your neck of the woods. When you were talking about the Warminster Triangle, would you be able to give an idea of what type of size that triangle area is?
Well, people say it could be from Bristol to Melksham, Bath, that sort of entire area, really.
And what type of...
as regards geography, I couldn't give you a precise sort of triangular idea of what the actual area encompasses, but a lot of the Wiltshire, possibly Somerset area, definitely yes.
And would you say, is that a few hundred miles in a direction or anything like that? Like,
it's possibly a few hundred miles as regards land acreage, I would imagine, yes.
I see. And here's another question in the forum. Are there reliable photos of what was seen or recordings of what was heard available today? And if so, where can we find them? Also, well, again, go ahead.
You mentioned YouTube earlier on, obviously.
Yes.
But again, going back to what I said earlier, in those days, people did not have the access to modern photographic aerial recording devices. I mean, for example, I think when I was in Warminster, the highest ASA rating film that I could get for the camera was, in colour, was 1000 ASA. Now, you could actually boost it up to 1600 by developing it, and whatever it is would come out in black and white. Basically, if your listeners don't know what an ASA number is, the higher the number, the better you've got a chance of getting a photograph in low light.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for example, I don't know if you can see that here, but that is the famous Faulkner photograph taken in 1965, which has now been basically said to be a fake. And the reason why it's so grainy is because that particular image has been blown up so much that the individual grains of silver halide in the negative are actually showing up.
Mm-hmm. All right, so why is it considered a fake?
Again, it's down to various people. I mean, Faulkner himself claimed that it was genuine, and then said it was a fake, and then said, no, actually it is genuine, and no, it's a fake, no, it is genuine. So, with that sort of parentage behind an image like that, you have to think, you have to wonder.
And this is the person that it came from?
Yeah, Faulkner actually took the photograph, handed it to Shuttlewood. Shuttlewood, who, as I said, was a provincial reporter, must have looked at it and thought, this could be a gravy train number. and sent it to one of the London papers, which ran a double-page spread on Warminster and the photograph. So Faulkner's never made any money out of it at all.
Yeah, it's still. I understand why you'd be leery of something like that, because if the person that hands over the photo is calling it a fake and going back and forth, it doesn't hold very well.
No, it doesn't, definitely.
Yeah. Now, also in that same question, this I think it was Bill. Is that his name? Yes, Bill in the forum was asking, are there hoax photos? Which that one probably is. But are there other ones that you can steer the listener away from?
I don't honestly know is the answer to that question. I mean, Shuttlewood at the beginning and through quite a bit of the 1960s had two other people on his skywatching team, Sybil Champion and a chap called Bob Strong. Now, Bob Strong was the photographer, and Bob Strong took quite a few photographs of reported UFOs, but as I mentioned previously, I'd passed my course in photography, and one of his photographs is what I would class as a typical negative kink, in so much that the negative was actually just squeezed slightly and then developed, and you get this crescent shape white light on the photograph, and that is claimed to be a UFO. So photographs from Warminster are rarer than hen's teeth, trust me.
Yeah.
So, I've yet to see anything that to me says, yeah, that is a genuine UFO shot.
And were there other times that you yourself tried to catch something and you had challenges?
Yes, but again, it boils down to the speed of the film and being in place at the time. I mean, and I took some photographs of an army flare that was coming down because the army were on manoeuvres one particular night. But I didn't do it as to fake anything. I did it purely as a logistical exercise to see if those photographs would come out, which they did, because you had this white blob with sort of smoke coming behind it when I blew the negative up, which again looked like some of the photographs that Bob Strong had taken.
Oh, wow. Several people had reported seeing a cigar-shaped craft in that area. What are some other shapes that people have seen there?
Well, obviously, the cigar-shaped objects, the typical saucer-type shapes. But again, a lot of them were seen at night, and they were what Arthur Shuttlewood christened as amber gamblers, which were just sort of like reddish or orange balls of light which would move erratically and at speed in front of the skywatchers.
Wow. If you had to guess how many sightings were actually seen in the area, would you say in the hundreds, or would you say even more than that?
I would say in the thousands.
In the thousands. Isn't that amazing?
Shuttlewood himself actually said that, within 2 or 3 years of doing these regular sky watches, he had amassed something in the region of 2,000 to 3,000 sightings. Jeez. Now, whether they were all UFOs is open to debate. Trust me.
Well, all it takes is one, right?
Yeah. And which the Faulkner photograph actually proves, because it did hit the press in a big way.
Right. Now, when something like this goes on, like a flap like this, it makes me wonder why it's not being, scientifically researched when it's so available, or it's not anymore as it used to be, not as frequent as it used to be. But that question always arises when I speak to someone that is talking about a flap in an area. Today we have better technology for that. There's people out there trying to get equipment like UFO Talk, other places like that are actually looking for, ground station places that can take all different types of readings. Has anyone, to your knowledge, ever thought about doing something like that in the area?
I think, and again, to use the term kindly, well-meaning amateurs. Places like the UFO and the Flying Saucer Review, they all did investigations into the phenomenon, all of which were inconclusive. But as regards serious scientific investigation, I'm afraid a lot of professionals will steer away from the subject because of the subject matter.
Right. But there are people that are funding and taking this serious. Mark D'Antonio, for one, he's in the testing phase of the UFO TOG 2 right now, testing the cameras and the other equipment. And if that gets some really good backing, that's going to go all over the world, not just the United States.
Yeah, it will, definitely. But of course, what we need now is another Warminster, is another Bonnybridge. You know, that's what we need, because they don't see, unless I'm so totally out of touch with things, there just don't seem to be the flaps of UFO sightings like they used to be.
I spoke to someone in England that told me that he never had a sighting. He's into UFOs and all that, but he's never had a sighting, and he says because the weather's always so overcast.
So crap.
Yeah. Is that what you find a lot in that area?
Yes, and I mean, it always used to make me smile that even though, you know, I would be up on Cradle Hill during the day as well as the night, during the day I was always alone, because there seemed to be this mindset that UFOs were only seen at night. So, yeah, and I mean, another reason why I think Warminster, if you'll pardon the pun, took off to a degree was that, as a lot of listeners may be aware, in this country we suffered very badly from smog and pollution in the 1950s and the early 1960s due to the amount of fossil fuels that were being burnt, not only in power stations but at home, in homes as well. So the government passed something called the Clear Air Bill, which basically encouraged people to go over to central heating rather than open fires, and sort of, you know, monitoring the discharge from the power stations. So over the years, the sky slowly started to clear, and people were starting to see more of the night sky than they had done for a generation or more. That added to the dawn of the space age and the dawn of mass air transportation means that people were looking up at the sky more, particularly at night, and seeing moving lights. Now, again, I'm not saying that every moving light was either an aircraft or whatever, but again, it just proves that Warminster was on the cusp of a new era, shall we say. So whether that had something to do with it, I don't know.
Had anyone ever reported anything much earlier in time in that area that you're aware of?
There have been reports. I mean, I can't give it you verbatim, but there was one that was from around 1910 of a fast-moving aeroplane illuminated travelling over the town. Now, I believe it was during the day, and this was only, 9 years after the Wright brothers took off at Kitty Hawk. So, you know, what was it they saw? There were reports in the 17th and 18th century of different coloured balls of light fighting in the sky over the area. So, you know, there always have been UFOs, and there obviously always have been some form of UFOs or activity over the Warminster area, but not to the frequency and the intensity in the 1960s.
Right. Now, what about abductions? Does that ever come up in regards to Warminster?
No, I've got no reports of anybody being abducted, but I have read reports either in Shuttlewood's books or heard from other people of, particularly in the 60s and the early 70s, of mysterious strangers being seen in the town who, I think one was actually run over by a car and then who promptly disappeared. So again, no, it's not what you would class as a classic UFO case by any means. It's quite quite British, really, I suppose, quite subdued compared to some of the reports you hear worldwide.
Right. Now, I know in the States, you hear a lot about abductions constantly. And I just have never asked this question of the UK from anyone from there. Is that an ongoing situation that you're aware of? I'm not saying in the Warminster area, but
I'm pretty certain that abductions go on throughout the UK. But again, it's getting them reported and being taken seriously. I mean, you I think are very lucky by being in America, because I think there is a more open mind to the UFO phenomenon than there probably is in this country, particularly when I was sort of active in Warminster, for want of a better word. And I, to a degree, put this down to what I call the post-X-Files generation, in that the X-Files basically opened the subject via the media to a lot more people, and it's a lot more accepted now. It's getting that way in this country as well. But, you know, in years gone by, people would not talk about it. I mean, when I'm at work, you know, I come into contact with people, and, you know, you discuss things with them. They say, oh, what are your interests? And I sort of say, well, you know, I'm interested in the Warminster phenomenon. They go, oh, yeah, Warminster, I remember that. Mm-hmm. Blimey, yeah, I remember that. So it's almost a case of here today, gone tomorrow with us in this country to a degree. I mean, Rendlesham Forest, I think, will always be with us.
Yes.
Due to a lot of the politics that are going on. I mean, that's probably the best way to describe it. But, you know, things like Warminster, very parochial, it's a very British thing. I mean, even people in the town don't know much about it now. I mean, the town has grown in size over the years. I think it's probably doubled its population. I mean, and again, I can prove that by in 2015, on the August bank holiday, which was the 50th anniversary of the town hall meeting, I organised a convention in Warminster, and somebody came up to me at the end of it and said, "Oh, they thoroughly enjoyed it. You know, it's you know, we've lived in this town for about 5-7 years. We never knew any of this ever happened."
Huh.
So, you know, and a lot of the town people do poo-poo it. You know, they say, no, whatever, you know. So, yeah, whether it's a typically British thing, I don't know.
Did the Ministry of Defence ever get involved in any part of this?
They will have been. They should have been, if not they were, simply because of the Salisbury Plain training ground, which was right next to Cradle Hill. So yeah, well, again, I can give you information on something I was sent a few years ago, in that this woman contacted me because she'd obviously got a few questions about Warminster, and I answered them. And the reply came back and thanked me very much and said, well, my dad was a soldier at the infantry barracks there, and he often used to go on what they call stag duty. Now, stag duty is basically guard duty. And she said that her father had told her that they were bored, you know, they used to get bored doing this guard duty, so they were sort of unofficially skywatch. And he said there were 1 or 2 times when they saw things which they, as soldiers, couldn't explain. And the one time they actually reported it because a low-flying amber gambler was seen flying over the camp over towards the Salisbury Plain training ground, of which at that time there was no activity from the army. And that report was taken seriously, but it was inconclusive. So yeah, they must know, or they do know about what happened there. But if you're talking the Ministry of Defence, you are probably talking it's veiled in secrecy.
Now, there's a lot of talk about documents that have been released, and some, you know, more being released. Have you ever tried to search through? I know it's really hard to sift through these documents, but has anyone ever alerted you to any of them regarding?
Regarding them, yes. I've got a whole folder on the computer on an external hard drive of the MOD files that were released. I mean, these days now you actually have to pay to view them, but if you caught them in time, you could download them for free. So, you know, I have got, well, if I printed it out, I mean, goodness knows how many reams of paper I'd get through. But basically, I'm not saying they're useless, but names, addresses, locations, and times are all blanked out.
Yes. Well, I understand. I understand why they do that, but sometimes they. You all right?
Yep, fine. Sorry.
We got that on film too.
Sorry?
I said we got that on film too.
Oh my God! I'm leaving the country now. No, going back to the MOD. Yeah, they have got to be aware of what happened. Again, another story. I was up there in I think it was 86, and my friend and I had gone down, and we did a sky watch, and we decided not to go back home that night. So we thought, okay, we'll sleep in the car. So I don't know, it must have been about 11 o'clock. We decided to get our heads down, fell asleep, and then I got woken up by lights approaching up the hill on the road, and an Army Land Rover pulled up, and I wan down the window and said, "What are you doing here?" "We're sky watching." "Oh, don't give us any of that UFO crap. What the hell are you doing here?"
Yeah.
So we are sky watching. Well, basically then I had to show my driver's license, with the threat of having an automatic rifle poked in my ear, and we were escorted off the hill.
Jeez.
So again, does that answer your question? In that, yes, you know, the MOD are aware.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. So I was looking at the timeline on your website, and it talks about you know, the different sightings. Is that so? There's some really quite detailed. I'm just trying to see, was there the same person twice on any of these sightings, or is it all different people throughout?
There have been witnesses who have seen multiple sightings, yes. I mean, obviously, because I haven't got the information to hand, I can't actually give you their names. But yeah, oh yeah, there were people that sort of were particularly, I think, in the era of the sonic sounds, should we say, repeatedly visited.
Right. Now, I know they did the film in the 1990 on the Warminster UFO. Do you think there'll ever be another documentary about it?
I don't think a full-length documentary. I've been asked to take part in 2 television programs, of which I'm waiting to hear more about. The one is by a group of amateur filmmakers, the other one is by a production company. Because sadly, a lot of people are not aware of Warminster. And again, I can tell you a short story in that a few years ago there was a 4-part series produced called Britain's Closest Encounters. And I was approached by the production team to ask for the address of a researcher who not only researched the UFO phenomenon in Warminster, but then moved to South Wales, where the Dyfed Enigma took place. And I said, well, you know, I'm sorry, but I've lost contact with the said person. You know, but are you doing anything about Warminster? And the answer was, well, what happened in Warminster? So I had to go through the usual spiel. And on the strength of that, in part 2, I think it was, which was called, I think, the Welsh Triangle, I'm on that in sort of with them giving a 5-minute spot to Warminster. So, you know, even if these researchers from television programs don't know about it, then what chance is there going to be of a proper documentary made?
Right, right. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You know, possibly part of a documentary could include this as far as great, you know, sightings in the UK or something like that, including Rendlesham Forest, which, like you said, always, of course, gets in the mix.
Well, Rendlesham Forest has got sex appeal. I don't think Warminster has.
Yeah, it's that's a good one. British Roswell, as they say.
Yeah.
Now, at one point you mentioned about people claiming there are beings in town. In this forum question, it says, what do you think of the stories of small beings interrupting training at a nearby infantry training school? Have other beings been seen? Is this basically the same story of what you were talking about, or is this something different?
This, I think, is something different, because I have to admit that I don't know a lot about little people being interrupting army exercises or whatever. I mean, there was a story that Shuttlewood himself told me, which I do take with a pinch of salt, is that an army tank crew was buzzed by a UFO and shot a beam of light out on it, and the members of the tank crew then had to be buried in lead-lined coffins. Now, that to me is just a little bit too going down the sensationalist avenue, personally.
Right. Hey, if anyone listening live in the chat room would like to pose a question, go ahead and post it up there, and I'll ask Kevin for you. There's about a 2-minute delay here, so eventually I'll get that if they post a question. So I meant to ask you right off the bat, you do want to give out your website, I'm sure, so I'll do that for you. There's a lot of information for the listener to see there. It's www.ufo-warminster.co.uk, right?
That's the one.
Yes. And I really like the timeline. And did that all come about from you going through newspaper clips, or how did you put that together?
Well, the information was put together by myself and Steve Dewey, my co-author, and he's basically transcribed everything onto the website. I mean, you know, we've both got busy lives and we just can't keep updating it regularly. In fact, if anything, the UFO Warminster Facebook page is probably updated a lot more regularly. But yeah, I mean, it was a case of going through books, magazines, periodicals, the works, to get the information, then collating it into a cohesive timeline.
I got it. Okay. And the photographs, I was looking at them. I only got through the first page. Nothing really, nothing that you can really see really clearly, unless these photographs really blow up. Well, they blow up somewhat, but there's not really any spectacular photographs, unless I'm missing something.
No, I don't think you're missing anything. I mean, I think that, like I said before, you know, the problem with Warminster is that, you know, we did not have that at the time, from the 60s through possibly until the late 70s, we didn't have the technology to take good, clear photographs.
Right.
Whereas today, you know, I mean, I remember seeing one on something on YouTube a couple of years ago of supposedly UFOs over Jerusalem. You know, and I thought, wow, ooh, yeah, hey, hang on, you know, hang on, no, is that a fake? You know, so
yeah,
it's in the eye of the beholder to a degree, I think. You know, I could still, you know, I still am angry the fact that those 4 photographs I took of that cigar-shaped object never came out.
Oh, I bet. Can you tell us about Arthur Shuttlewood's skywatching team?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about them. Arthur himself, as I said, was a journalist for the Warminster Journal. He was at one stage a councillor for Warminster Town, ex-Grenadier Guardsman, and he was evacuated from Dunkirk when the British forces retreated. Died sadly in 1996, but did a lot of work keeping Warminster and getting Warminster's name out there as regards the phenomenon. Sybil Champion I know very little about. She herself was, I believe, a housewife, and Bob Strong, the photographer, was an ex-RAF pilot who was obviously very keen on photography. And that was basically the core of his initial skywatching team. And then obviously later on, people like Ken Rogers, the late Ken Rogers, who wrote the Warminster Triangle, he moved to the town, as did other people, and they all sort of came into that group. So Arthur was never really solely doing it on his own. He helped set up the Fountain Centre in Warminster. That's the place where I used to stay at, run by Peter and Jane Paget. And then he moved on and then helped set up another organisation called UFO Info. So he was proactive with the phenomenon in the town, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Now, when this was going on back in the 1960s, and it started right after you said it finally got some publicity. Did people flock to the town in hopes of seeing something?
Yes. There is a famous quote within the Warminster fraternity, shall we say, of one of the landlords of the public houses in the town saying that it was the only time he'd ever known the town run dry of beer. That was possibly around again the August 1965 mark of the famous town hall meeting, and apparently one of the fields in Cradle Hill was turned into a mini Glastonbury, in so much there were so many cars and tents on there. You know, they say there must have been up to 1,000 people up on the hills that weekend.
Wow. Now, back in 1965, I saw on the timeline that someone observed a large red ball, which we would call like an orb sighting, which you hear about quite a bit today. Was that a lot of what people were seeing as well?
Yes. I think, again, going back to what I spoke about earlier on, Arthur Shuttlewood referred to them as amber gamblers. And again, I didn't have first-hand knowledge because I wasn't there, but some friend of mine had first-hand knowledge of they were holding a sky watch in another area. I believe it was called Upton Scudamore, which is a small village just outside Warminster. And again, two of them had hunkered down in the car to sleep, and they were rudely woken up by the two others banging on the roof of the car, saying, "Get out, you've got to come and look at this." And one of these amber gamblers literally buzzed them and then went off in the direction of the plane. So I think this light that you're referring to is probably going to be a rather large amber gambler.
Yep. Well, at this time, I'm going to say that if anyone would like to call in and ask our guest a question, we've had trouble with Skype joining calls, but somehow I noticed maybe with the recent download that's been fixed because I was able to connect the last person. So if anyone wants to call in, you're welcome to call in and ask our guest a question. That number is 603. If you're calling from out of country, it's 1-603-967-4030. And also, you can Skype in, and that's at Marty Willis. That's all it is, Marty Willis, MartyWillis. So let's just see. Oh, the guy in the chat room, Mike, wanted to know if there's anything more you can give on the information where the person claimed that he ran over a being that vanished. Was there more information on that?
There is in Shuttlewood's books. Or, as I say, all I know is that it was. I think it was a foggy night, and the car was driving. Saw this figure ahead of them, and before the driver could take evasive action, the person was hit by the car. The driver stopped, got out, and the person was no longer there.
Jeez, that is really bizarre. You know, you do hear of crafts a lot of times, like a craft will just plain disappear. Instead of, you talked earlier about seeing one take off and all that, but still, you never hear about. You also hear about them just plain disappearing. So let me just give this over to the Skype. We might have someone calling in. I think that might be it for our forum questions. because you already talked about Roger Hooton, right?
Yeah.
And at the anniversary, there's one last question here. You commented at the 2015 Warminster anniversary that a lot more people are ready to embrace the subject of UFOs today, much more in the past. Do you think that's in the UK, or do you think that's worldwide?
I think it's worldwide. I mean, I can only obviously speak for the UK, but when I was first going down to Warminster, when I was at college, which would have been about 1976 to 78, something like that, you kept your interest in this very quiet because you were ridiculed. These days, whether or not it's because, as I say, people are more open now to more esoteric ideas, you can discuss it in a serious way, such as we are doing it tonight, because people don't take a step away from you and have that faraway look in their eyes as to say, I'm getting out of here.
Right.
So, yeah, and again, I think it's to do with things like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the film, The X-Files, Dark Skies, possibly, all these main media programs, I think have, to a degree, opened people's minds slightly. And not only that, but of course there was a report a few years ago in this country saying that church attendances were dropping because people were no longer interested or wanted that kind of spirituality. Now, whether people are going over to a more cosmological spirituality, I don't know. But, I do think that people are more willing to embrace something like that now.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I totally agree. And just in the short time that I've been doing this show, which is, oh my God, am I coming up on 5 years? I might be. Yeah, I think so. Or maybe even longer. I don't know. But for the length of time I've been doing this, I think that just with the more awareness of, possible life-bearing planets out there in just a short time, that I think it's going to be easier and easier a pill to swallow if it ever comes along.
I think it's almost arrogance on our belief, on us, to believe that we are the only intelligent life in the universe. I mean, Catholic upbringing, we were created by God. And then I did hear something a while back that the Catholic Church had now backstepped slightly and said something along the lines of, well, if intelligent life is found in the universe, then it's all part of God's making.
Yes.
So it's almost like, we're hedging our bets here, guys.
A question in the chat room: out of all the stories that you've heard and researched, well, I'm going to hang on that because I have someone calling in now, and I'd rather take the call, and I'll finish that question later.
Okay.
Hello, caller. You're on the air. Can you tell us your first name and where you're calling from?
My name's Ryan. I am calling from South Carolina.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much. You have a question for Kevin?
Pardon me, sir?
Do you have a question for Kevin?
I do. Kind of a long-winded type way. I'm a long-time skeptic, and the issue I take with this is there's never any hard evidence. And my question for Kevin is: has he ever seen any really hard? What's the hardest evidence he's seen that proves we have been visited by extraterrestrials?
I think the hardest evidence that I've seen, if you heard me talking about it earlier on, was the sighting of those 4 red lights in Warminster, which the lead object flew away at speed and then did that 90-degree turn without stopping. Yeah, that was the whole reason why I was interested in Warminster and the UFO phenomenon, in so much that, yes, I wanted to see it for myself, and I did. And boy, did that... I'd say it changed my life to a degree.
All right, I'm hearing a little bit of an echo here. It's probably you probably have your radio or your computer on. So in the background,
I turned it down.
yeah, you're going to want to mute that. Did you mean more of a theoretical question as far as that question goes? Like, in general, what type of evidence has he seen, or were you talking about him personally?
Yeah, just him personally. I mean, every UFO investigator has their standard of yes. I mean, yes, it's proven. I mean, for example, Stanton Friedman, for example, he likes to point out that the cumulative number of anecdotal evidence, some physical evidence that in my opinion can be replicated here on Earth, and I'm just kind of asking for what he considers the hardest evidence he's seen. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, as I said, it was those 4 red lights, and of course I have come across in the past people saying, "Nah, it didn't happen," whatever. And I'm sorry, but the only answer I have to that is that you weren't there. And if that person isn't there, then all they've got is your word for it. And so, it's subjective. If you yourself were to go out tonight and see something that you couldn't explain logically, then you would consider it to be a UFO.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, I really appreciate the question. Thanks so much for calling in.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Hang up now. Take care now. All right. So we had another question up there, and that is, out of all the stories you've heard and researched, what was the one story that still has you baffled today?
Ooh, that's a biggie. Well, obviously the Warminster phenomenon to start with, obviously, because again we have no answers. But then again, we have no answers for the UFO phenomenon per se. So if you took Warminster out of the equation, I would probably say then, with what I've read, Rendlesham, probably. But because there is so much fog around the subject of Rendlesham at the moment, then I don't know, but I would say probably did Rendlesham happen? Yep, I think it did. What happened? I don't know, because again, using that mantra of mine, I wasn't there.
I know I've had a number of people from Rendlesham on my show in the past. There's a few that have declined. One, Jem Peniston keeps saying he's going to be on eventually. I really want to question him pretty hard about the digital download he supposedly got. I'm a little skeptic about that one. But there is, as you know, a lot of infighting between the witnesses at Rendlesham Forest, and but there's really solid evidence, I think, in that particular one. I consider it one of the top 5 sightings of all time myself. I don't know what your feelings are on that.
Well, I agree with what you're saying about it being one of the top sightings of all time, but the problem is the water's getting muddied, and I am steering well clear of Rendlesham as such, not geographically, but the subject itself. I mean, I have been to Rendlesham, but that's beside the point. Because it's not doing us any favours. I mean, I always thought there was a lot of politics and a lot of mudslinging in ufology in the 1970s. And when I got back into it, about 10 years or so ago now, properly got back into it, I was shocked and amazed that it's even worse. It's almost like people are point scoring off each other. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not what the subject's about.
Well, there are a lot of flaws, and I think you can blame some of that on technology. For instance, there's I'm talking to you in Russia on Skype. through the internet that didn't exist, when you were first interested in this topic.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be talking about it. So in that case, there is a lot of politics. Unfortunately, there are people that are really diehards against their golden egg sort of falling apart, so they'll protect it even if new evidence comes along. I've seen that a few times.
Yeah.
And okay, so you got basically out of the UFO field for a while and back into it. Can you describe what made you leave and what made you come back?
Oh, right. Well, I grew up, basically, for want of a better expression. No, I got married, and obviously, married life, you have to make sacrifices, you have to sort of accommodate the partner, etc., etc. And I had a very happy 14-odd-year marriage until my wife died, and I was going through a box. We'd recently moved. I seem to make a habit of this. We'd recently moved, and I found a box that we hadn't unpacked. And I'd done the very, very, very first, very rough draft of what became UFO Warminster Cradle of Contact. And I looked at it and read what I'd written in about 3/4 of an hour, and I thought, my God, I could do better than that now. So I sat down, hunkered down, wrote everything up, remade some old friendships with people that I was in Warminster with that I'd lost contact with, and I'm still in contact with them now, bless them. And then through a complete accident, I was doing an internet search on Warminster, and this website came up, and I looked at it, and there was a book there called In Alien Heat, The Warminster Mystery Deconstructed by Steve Dewey and John Reese. And believe it or not, I actually had met Steve in October of 1976 when he came to the research centre I was staying at to report a UFO sighting. And he very kindly offered to have a look at the book. And then before I realised it, he got his polish out and he polished it and brushed it up and changed it. And that's now history. So the book's out there. It's co-written by Steve and myself. But that's the reason why I got back into it, because, Warminster is a little bit like a drug. I went back down there and I think, this is what I've been missing, all this sort of thing. And then before you realise it, you get drawn back into it again. And I don't regret it one bit.
Well, that's good. We're getting close to the end of the show, and it goes fast. Now, one of the things I always think about is, or I get quite a few emails, and also I might as well say this while I'm talking about that. If I don't answer your email right away, I will try to eventually answer it. So don't be afraid to email me at martin@podcastufo.com. But one of the questions that a lot of people send me is, where are the really big sightings? What's happening? We don't hear of any major like Phoenix Lights or Rendlesham Forest or anything like that. So what is your answer to that? Why do you think there's not, with all the cell phone technology out there and everything that we have, why aren't the really big, heavily witnessed sightings happening?
That's a difficult one. It could be that, to a degree, like the Warminster phenomenon, it served its purpose, possibly. But if I knew the answer to that question, along with a couple of other questions within the field, believe you me, you would be speaking to me, and I would be in my 18-room mansion with a Rolls Royce outside the front door.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that you will find is that this subject will never, ever pay you back in any way.
Yeah.
So I think, to be honest, whether or not it served its purpose, I don't know, but whether or not people are becoming so blasé about it now, light in the sky, must be a UFO. Right, carry on doing what I was doing, sort of thing. And I mean, the other thing you've got to think is exactly how much UFOs have now got into the human psyche, per se. Right. UFO means flying saucer. Flying saucer means little green men from Mars or Jupiter or wherever, Alpha Centauri. So whether or not now it's becoming, or they've become so commonplace that people don't really notice it, or they're not, they see it and they don't want to sort of, make anything more of it. I don't know. It's only some of those people, and I don't know any of them, thank heavens, who, post these faked photographs and videos up on YouTube because they want their 15 seconds of fame.
Yes, there are a few of them, Secure Team 10 and Third Phase of the Moon, a couple of these places that produce basically hoaxed videos. Every once in a while, someone will actually send them a real video because they think they're, the person to send one to. It really muddies the water, and it's all about making thousands of dollars a month, unfortunately. And that does really destroy a lot when it comes to people researching credible UFOs. I had actually someone from the former agent from the Department of Defense on my show a while back, Chris Mellon, and he contacted me because he was looking online and saw one of the Secure Team 10 videos and asked me, is this real? So even someone like him, anyone can get fooled by these things.
That is very true.
Not really too much we can do about it either.
It goes with the territory, I'm afraid, to a degree. I'm members of various UFO groups on Facebook and other sort of groups, and one of the ones that always makes me smile is, did we land on the moon?
Yes.
Well, sorry, I lived through it, and as far as I'm concerned, there's no way you can fake it.
You must be talking about Mark D'Antonio's recent post with all the actual images of the lunar landings. That's on.
I've seen so many over the years, Martin. As I say, it just makes my blood boil to a degree.
I have to tell you something. I had someone on my show that said that the lunar landings were all faked and all that, and I said, well, what about the images where you can actually see them and even the footprints, and the rovers and all that? What about those images? Yeah. And they said, oh, we went up there afterwards and put all that stuff up there. I thought that was really comical.
Well, again, you see, there's the other thing that people have to think about is that, and I can talk about a UK conspiracy theory to a degree here. It's like the Princess Diana death.
Yeah.
People believe that she was assassinated, killed. Mm-hmm. But how on earth can you keep that secret? How on earth can you keep a film crew secret who have been filming 5 stage moon landings, 6 stage moon landings?
Yeah.
You could keep a lid on it.
Right. Now, I actually spoke with Alan Bean, who was I believe he was the 4th man who set foot on the moon, and I asked him, how do you handle these people that think you never went there? And he says, I absolutely don't even try to change their mind. He said, I let them think whatever they want to think because they're going to anyway. So that's going to wrap it up for us, Kevin, tonight. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, Martin. Thank you very much. Sorry about the hiccups at the beginning.
No trouble at all. All right, you take care.
And you, sir.
All
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, that's it for our show. I want to thank you for hanging in through the technical trouble at first, and I want to thank the people that watched us live and joined in the chat room and all that. Also the people that called in. Also want to thank our guest and Alejandro Rojas. Next week, we'll be back with Mark O'Connell, and he'll be talking about his latest book, a new book on J. Allen Hynek. Mark's been on the show before. He's great. So really looking forward to that. And thank you again for listening and supporting the show. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.